This week, Health Minister Greg Hunt described the far-left activist group GetUp as Labor's campaigning arm. Well, Minister, I could not agree with you more, and plenty of my viewers will also agree. Liberal MPs Kevin Andrews and Nicole Flint were both victims of GetUp's vile campaign against the coalition, Conservatives in particular, with Nicole, the member for Boothby, only recently speaking out about the tactics used against her. But rather than just complain, Flint's putting together a heavy-hitting submission to the upcoming inquiry into the conduct of the last election. Straight out of the blocks, on the back of this criticism, GetUp's leader denies they did anything wrong. Joining me tonight to go through the latest and GetUp's response to the weekend's CPAC conference is Advanced Australia National Director Gerard Benedet. Thanks for coming on the show, Gerard. GetUp's campaign, and, you know, all credit to you and Advance Australia, GetUp's campaign against Conservatives inside the Liberal Party, not just the Liberal Party, but particularly Conservatives, was really, I think, taken to the people in the recent federal election. People really understood, or we unmasked GetUp, because I think up until then Australians thought they were really a grassroots organisation. That's what they claim. We know that that's not true. They also claim that they sort of judge issues on their merit, but we also know that that's false. Just remind us again who they targeted and how widespread their activism was.
Well, Peter, this cult-like activity from GetUp has been around for now 14 years. They decided the last federal election they were going to take on what they called their hit list, which I think most Australians would be very uncomfortable with in terms of not only the terminology, but even the thought process behind a hit list of mainstream MPs. So there was Nicole Flint in South Australia, Andrew Hastie in Western Australia, Michael Sukkar in Victoria, as well as Josh Frydenberg, Greg Hunt and many others, not to mention Warringah, where Tony Abbott was standing, and Peter Dutton in Dixon.
All right. Just recently, Michelle Grattan, known to many of you as a long-standing political commentator and columnist, interviewed Paul Oosting, who is the head of GetUp. I want to play you a grab. This is what he had to say to Michelle Grattan.
We have to acknowledge that we have a bad state of Conservative politics as a result, in a sense. So there's a lot of work we need to do as to why we couldn't do it in this election cycle to the degree that was necessary.
So it basically writes off the Australian electorate in majority terms who voted for Scott Morrison, and they see it as some sort of crime, Gerard. And this is what angers the quiet Australian more than anything else, is this attempt, particularly by the left, to delegitimise their right to vote for the centre-right.
That's so true, Peter. It's like nothing happened in May. It's like mainstream Australians didn't stand up and vote with their feet at polling booths across the nation for a sensible, centre-right government that was going to look after their concerns. They weren't going to take their utes away like the Labor Party was proposing. They weren't going to increase carbon taxes across the board like the Greens and the Labor Party were proposing. Negative gearing changes, franking credits, there was lots of issues. GetUp washed simply straight over the top of this, and they blame Australians for the election result.
Well, let's have another listen to Oosting. He claims it was all about issues, not individuals. Let's have a listen.
Nicole Flint doesn't really have a high profile, so our campaign wasn't centred on her. It was centred on issues like climate change. And I think there's been a number of attempts by the Murdoch press and the members of the hard right faction to make these claims about GetUp that largely don't accord with what happened on the ground.
So he said, look, Nicole Flint doesn't have a really high profile. The campaign wasn't about her, it wasn't centred on her, it was on issues like climate change. Well, that's an out-and-out lie. Let's have a look at this flyer. I'll put it up on the screen, people can see. This is a GetUp flyer. It says, Nicole Flint, most backwards politician, GetUp targets Boothby MP, Nicole Flint. That's put paid to that lie, Gerard.
Absolutely. This was a personal, vitriolic campaign against a Conservative woman like GetUp has run never before. It was simply amazing what they did in South Australia. The gall of Paul Oosting to go on Michelle Grattan's conversation and say the campaigns weren't political, it wasn't based on personalities, when his own flyers depict a very clear picture of Nicole Flint, is absolutely a joke.
All right, now let's talk money, because GetUp like to say that they're sort of sponsored by mums and dads with $5 here and $10 there, and they're not sort of connected to the world wide web of left-wing radicals. Let's have a listen to what he said, and we'll get some facts after that.
We would have spent over $3 million. We were yet to sort of fully go through those processes, but of course we'll make all of our accounts transparent through the declarations we need to make as a political campaigner, as defined by the Electoral Act.
Well, he says $3 million, Gerard. I reckon they spent close to that in Warringah. How much did they really raise, and what did they spend, do you think?
Oh, look, that figure, Peter, is absolutely laughable. We know that they raised over $13.5 million last financial year. Paul Oosting went on radio during the election campaign and said he had 62,000 donors at an average of $22. If you do the math, it doesn't add up. There's more questions here than answers. And like you, I believe they spent far more during the election campaign than Paul Oosting's actually telling the public, particularly when you take into consideration staff. In that interview with Michelle Grattan, he goes on to say he only has half of the staff that he did during the election campaign, and that half is still 50. Now, you and I both know that 50 people in an office totally dedicated to regressive policies, to driving up your electricity costs, to radical gender theories in your schools, to changing your Australian way of life will have a big impact. And there's no doubt that GetUp's campaign failed, but they are here to stay. They've been here for 14 years, and we need to remain vigilant.
Yeah, and as a comparison, people at home should understand that the national head office of the Liberal Party has nowhere near 50 people outside of a campaign period. If GetUp's got 50, I reckon they'd have somewhere between 20, 25. So it's double at GetUp, the Liberal Party, and they're in power. I also want to have a look at the issue of CPAC, the CPAC conference on the weekend. You noticed something interesting. Gerard and I caught up on Saturday night, and he's got something he'll show you. But there was a letter that went out from GetUp. I'll put it on the screen for viewers at home. But they make mention that the extreme right was backing the conference. The extreme right get backing from corporate interests and mining billionaires. We build our movement from the ground up, they say, with donations from everyday people like you. Well, let's go back to a little bit of footage you gave us, Gerard, in the campaign from Bernie Sanders that demonstrates GetUp is part of a web of international hard left organisations that now campaign on issues like climate change right around the world and put pressure on and only on centre-right governments. Let's have a listen to Bernie Sanders.
Hello, GetUp. My friends, we confront many of the same challenges in our countries. We must remind people that they have the power to change public policies.
You had a great doco, Gerard, that went into where their money comes from, particularly the overseas funding. At the time, they were campaigning against foreign donations. They were receiving plenty of them themselves. But tell me about CPAC.
Look, CPAC was just simply a coming together of conservative, centre-right, whatever, libertarian, whatever words or stereotypes people want to use, people who valued free enterprise, family values, and it was a very, very entertaining conference with people like Nigel Farage, Mark Latham, John Anderson, Tony Abbott, Rowan Dean from your own network, and many others. And I think the 700-odd people that were through the conference over the entire weekend came away, particularly the feedback I've received, energised, understanding that they need to campaign continually to ensure that they protect the values and freedoms that we hold dear, whether it be freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association. Those things were all discussed at the conference. There was, I can assure you, no big conspiracy. You know, even GetUp turned up and sent one of their senior campaign directors along. He used a different name, credit to him, and he sat there for 2 days taking notes about the conference.
Yeah, just get into that, because I find this fascinating. You've got a good eye for people on the other side. You picked him in a crowd. Who is he, and do we have a photograph, proof for anything we can go on that he really does work for GetUp?
Yeah, absolutely. This gentleman's name is Ed Miller. He's a senior campaign director for economic fairness at GetUp, part of many of their videos on their website. And he was registered for a 3-day pass under the name of Ned Miller, so he was obviously very creative in that sense. But he sat there for basically 2.5 days and listened as the conference went on. I dare say he's part of the crew that drafted that email that you showed earlier. And Peter, there's another part of that email that really bells the cat on what they're all about. Besides the fact that they are obviously worried and need to turn up to conservative-minded conferences, in their email they go on to say, we need to find a truth that touches people and voters. Not the truth, not actual facts or figures or what's actually happening, but they need to find a truth. And their truth, particularly if you take this Ed Miller character at his word, is a nationalisation of resources, a nationalisation of banks, a federal job guarantee. And I thought, you know, that sounds relatively good. So I thought I'd go and have a quick look at what that means and what GetUp thinks that means. And they say very clearly that a federal jobs guarantee is a payment for people who don't work. And to quote
this is a universal wage
a job guarantee does not... Yeah, absolutely. A job guarantee does not require people to work in order to receive existing benefits. And you sit there and you think, well, we should be pro-merit, we should reward people for hard work, and then you've got this radical left-wing organisation that's intent on taking Australia backwards.
Yeah, we do not pay people to do nothing in this country. The best welfare is a job. Gerard, Benedet, more strength to your arm. I hope I see you sidling along to a GetUp conference, see if you can get in the door and get away with it. They mightn't be as good as you at picking the other side, but we'll see. Good luck with it all, and thanks for your time again tonight.